Rudy. How are you, buddy?
Good, Matt. Thanks for having me on your podcast. When you said that, it just reminded me of middle school with the IHOP special, the Rudy Tutti Fruity Breakfast special, which was something, and anyone from the mid '90s might remember from some of their commercials. But
I took my daughter Cece, topical, since we're intending on talking about being girl dads, to IHOP a couple of years ago. She heard that they have pancakes,
yeah,
and so we go, and she got like, I don't know, cupcake pancakes. It was a giant sugar bomb, and
okay.
I don't remember what the special occasion was, but I was like, you know what? Fuck it. We're here. Just get whatever you want. She got so nauseous after eating it, she refuses to go in an IHOP. So unintentionally, mission accomplished.
Yeah. Kids do. They get excited. My Elsie, my wife took my daughter Mardine, my eldest, to IHOP, and she was just like, "I can't believe we went there." And I was like, "I hope, by the way, I hope you're not courting IHOP as a sponsor because there's some IHOP bashing." But we had a tradition pre-COVID. We used to go to Cozy Kitchen in Seekonk, which is great, Seekonk, Mass. They're right across from the YMCA there, and really good pancakes. They make their own jam, rhubarb jam, which is really good. Mardine loves that on her pancakes. But yeah, I can't go to IHOP. I mean, it's at least for pancakes, I feel like you can do it at home so much
Yeah.
easier. Um, Whatever the new brand is for, we like. I mean, I make some from scratch, but we love the previously known as Jemima brand. I don't know what the new what is the name?
What's the woke name now?
What's the new name? I can't think of
I
the new
actually literally
name, but
don't
it's
know.
yeah. I like I have a box of it. We buy it from BJ's, like the two big boxes that last.
Google
Well,
machines
actually,
answer
last.
this now.
Yeah,
What's it called now?
but it's
Pearl
good stuff.
Milling Company.
Yeah, Pearl Mill. That's it. Pearl Milling Company. Yeah, the box looks identical. Obviously, like the same color scheme and everything. You recognize. Pick it out
Interesting.
of the lineup. But still really good pancake mix.
I am fascinated by this entire woke tide and all of the fun things that come with it. The Twitter meltdown over the last couple of weeks is a particularly beautiful point of glory for
Yeah,
so many reasons. To watch, I mean, assuming that they're not lying, Twitter usage has never been higher. And at the same time, it's absolute chaos, total and complete chaos.
I was just reading, but I didn't read the whole thing, so I don't want to speak ignorantly about it. But somebody was basically they faked, the blue check mark account. They faked some other company's name and like cost that company like 20 billion in
Multiple
share
companies.
price. Yeah.
Eli
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Eli
Yeah.
Lilly. The one for
Eli
Eli
Lilly.
Lilly was
That was it. It was Eli Lilly.
insulin
That
for
was the one.
free,
Yeah. Right. Insulin for free. That was it. Which
and then
is
I
which
saw
is
one for
great. I mean, for
Lockheed
people.
Martin,
Yeah.
which was like, we're not going to build any more weapons until we've like atoned for our sins or something like that.
So they picked that out of the first Iron Man movie as a,
Yeah.
as a straight playbook. Um, but
Oh,
yeah,
anywho,
yeah, no, it's been crazy. Anyway,
I'm really glad that we finally get a chance to connect in a forum like this because you've been a close friend, I'd say for a while, although it's only really been a couple of years, but it feels
yeah,
like I've known you for longer. Um, but what I love about our relationship is that as much as we agree on, I think neither one of us is afraid to just immediately and aggressively draw a line in the sand when we're like, well, actually, that's not even, no, that's totally not what I'm thinking. Very helpful for getting out of the echo chamber of, what I think social media can become. And actually, maybe that's an interesting place to start. CC's 8 and frequently, requesting iPad use. And I know that friends of hers have phones already, which
Yeah.
kind of blows my mind. What are you thinking in terms of balancing preparing them for a modern world that's obviously technology fueled and also not letting them become social pariahs against the clear litany of downside effects, especially for young girls?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'll start on the phone thing. This came up recently because Martine's friends, like Cece's, Martine's 8. There are a couple of them with phones, and I was like, oh, interesting, because I know their parents and respect them and like them, and they actually made a good point. They're like, well, she goes on sleepovers now, and they don't want their child to be uncomfortable asking the parent to make the phone call home. Because like I was thinking about my own sleepover experiences and yours, like everybody used to have a landline, right? Like you used to be able to call each other. So like if you ever got into a situation, I don't remember personally getting in that situation, but like of just feeling uncomfortable and being like, hey, I want to call my parents like to pick me up or something like that. You could do that rather easily.
Fairly discreetly. You didn't have to enter the
Right.
bed.
You didn't have to enter the
Sleeping.
bedroom or like ask like the parent, like, hey, I need your cell phone so I can call my parents because I'm feeling uncomfortable at this time. So that was the reasoning behind theirs. And they also legitimately stated that like, well, I'll let this one have a phone, but the other one's going to wait another 5 years over. Like, so you obviously treating some of the kids differently based on level of maturity. But yeah, I mean, Mardine's been asking for a couple of years now. She loves baking shows. She loves to bake. It's one of the activities we do together. She really, we try to limit her YouTube usage, YouTube Kids, and monitor that and her iPad screen time. But she's been like, I want a YouTube account. Like she wants to make videos and
Wow.
upload them on YouTube accounts. Like she's been asking for that since she was 6, and we're like, no.
When
And
Cece
then we,
found out I was uploading podcasts to
yeah.
YouTube, she almost like it was like her dad was the president of the United States. It was unbelievable the reaction she
Right. But I try to equate that back to our childhoods. At least I was a pretty heavy gamer where our parents didn't have Nintendo and Sega, Atari, N64, Super Nintendo, all that stuff. So for them, all of that was as foreign as probably. Well, I think we're more technologically because we did grow up this stuff, and certainly you and I are understanding of YouTube. But yeah, it's a big question, especially because that they are girls, especially and not to state how do I state this? I mean, I'm just directly, it's like, yeah, I just want to make sure that I feel like that there is more potential for harm for them than I would think of for boys. That's not to say that boys can't be harmed, especially from social media as well. There's a lot of that nature as well, but I think
what
a lot
age?
of
What feels like in your gut? Like if she was to come up and say, "I want an Instagram account," at what age are you even willing to have the discussion?
yeah, I mean, like I think societal pressure gives me like the answer to say like 13, just because
Yeah,
that's
that's
like
what I'm thinking.
teenage years.
Right.
Like, but at the same time, I'm also like, girls develop a lot faster than boys. I feel like a lot of them hit that 13-year-old maturity at 11. Um, Certainly for biological and because of their sex and everything else that accelerates their
Rudy, what is
growth
a?
and maturity.
I'm just kidding. We don't have to.
That might open up a whole. But anyway, but I think from that perspective, I don't know. 13, I feel like it's more about the worrisome about the others on social media. It's not that I'm so much worried, and I don't know if you would agree, like what Cece or Mardine are doing, but it's more what is out there. It's not that they would be posting things that I would be uncomfortable with or illicit, but what would they be exposed to?
Hmm.
And there are tools. There's lots of them. The whole, set of like reviews, podcasts of like here are the best like parenting, like monitoring tools and filter tools. But at the same time,
Well, I think
um,
about my own
yeah,
unfiltered, unfettered access to the internet I had as a
yeah,
teenager. And as a 13, 14-year-old boy, now maybe it was because, at least in the era, because we're talking like 1995. So there wasn't a lot of people with unfettered access to high speed internet at the time. But I had a 28.8 and then a 56K modem. And so I was like going after, what was it at that time? Napster, LimeWire,
Yeah.
ShareBear. There's all kinds of stuff. And it was, the things I was downloading were not appropriate.
Yeah.
Not appropriate for a 13-year-old boy to be consuming with no filter at all. And I don't just mean sexual stuff. Which of course there was plenty of that. I'm talking like, there was just all kinds of sites like ogrish.com and Consumption Junction and like just the most
Consumption Junction. Wow,
the most vile shit.
I haven't heard that name.
Consumption Junction, what should dysfunction?
In quite some time. Wow. Okay, sorry, I just got into, yeah, exactly. I remember, I think when you just said that, I had this, I don't know if you ever saw it, the Indian Olympics, which was on Consumption Junction. It was a man basically diving as if he was diving into a swimming pool, but just diving into the middle of the desert from like this massive hill. And then I think dying, assuming it wasn't fake. It was like, yeah. No, that website was messed up. Yeah, you're right. I grew up like you, similar age.
It's like, okay, how much of our present dysfunction is due to that? It's really difficult to calculate.
I do think, yeah, it's like, as you said, even the sexual stuff, it wasn't even that, while there was prevalency of that, and it wasn't even like going after that as much, but now it's even more, I guess, weaponized in a way. So yeah, there is a concern, and I don't know. Like, I feel like I feel like any of our kids, not just yours and mine, would have a serious advantage as a human being, and both like just as a human being and even in the competitive world, if we got them to lay off that stuff till they were 18 as much as possible, because they would have to have like human interactions and like know how to deal with people and talk to them, and the stuff that sadly the younger generation entering the workforce, especially during COVID, like they just didn't get, because they didn't have seniors like us. Not that we're like old, but like just more experienced people.
40,
no. I know. Not we're not old, but I just mean like,
no,
we
we're
talk
old.
about this.
Seniors is something.
Well, we talk not seniors. I meant like senior, like as in senior upperclassmen is what I meant. Not like, but just to provide, especially like brand new generation of employees entering the workforce for the first time, to understand like, work cues, understanding like, how to behave, how to like deal with people, how to talk to people, like all those things. They get that in school, of course, but then there's like the corporate work environment, assuming that that's what they're going into. But I think a lot of that is lost in the next generation, because they are spending the majority of their time interacting. When I was playing video games and even like computer games online, we would have like LAN parties. We would get people together and like haul your computers together into a room, or like go use a computer lab and all download the same, Counter-Strike software.
That was one of the best things that my dad ever did, is he set up 4 computers in the house on some Ethernet. I don't know what it would have been at the time. I can't imagine it was Cat 5. But we played Red Alert. We played Quake Arena.
Yeah.
That was a mind-blowing experience as a teenager, because it was way ahead of anything console-based.
I think for me, like, it's always been the same thing about video games and watching television. As much as I consume a lot of TV today, I prefer my daughters to play as much video games, way more video games, than just consuming TV, because at least you're thinking and creating. So from a social, and to go back to your Instagram perspective, I'm almost thinking like, would I almost like ask them, it's like, okay, you want to be on Instagram, fine, but you have to create like useful content for your peers. You want to be on TikTok, fine, but you have to create useful content. Like, what are you teaching people? Like, what skills do you have? You love baking? Great. And that's what she wants. Like, she wants a YouTube show.
Teach people how to do art? Great.
Yeah, right. Like, show, like, yeah, do that. At least you're not just a passerby and just consuming the content and not actually contributing anything back. So
The
That
danger,
would
of
be,
course,
yeah.
is then are you setting up the dopamine addiction of likes and comments and whatnot? Because I uploaded recently to my channel a jam session I did with some buddies, and I played it in the car today. And the first thing she asked, she like yelled it out of her mouth, "How many likes does it have?" And I'm just like, first of all, not that many. Second of all, it doesn't matter. But it's clear that even at this young age, they've associated value to that, and that's the piece that it's unclear how to deal with it. But what I'm increasingly convinced of is the answer is not to ignore it and bury it, especially something as prevalent as what we're talking about. But in general, I think things that are scary and dangerous, the more you ignore them, the more they become your shadow, the more they become the dragon hiding in the den, waiting to come and burn your village down in your sleep. Because at some point, they're going to trip into exposure. It's just like the classic thing that happens to an unfortunate number of women. If you were ever on campus freshman year, it's like, holy shit, what hedonism has been unleashed here? And the answer is that, they've been locked away and not exposed to things. And now all of a sudden they feel like I can do whatever I want. And there's no governor, there's no brakes, there's no like safety latch on this thing. And it's a little bit like parents who allow their kids to, try alcohol in the home in a normal, like ritual type setting, meaning like a nice meal with some wine or, tasting a beer, whatever, as opposed to I've never been allowed to even sniff alcohol. And now all of a sudden I'm at a frat party and I've got alcohol poisoning.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I'm on that point. Like Elsie and I talk about this. We come from pretty traditional backgrounds, and then from Middle Eastern, Judeo-Christian backgrounds. Well, Christian backgrounds, specifically Orthodox. But we talk about our daughters eventually dating, and one of the things I told her, like, look, I'm gonna allow her to date, assuming whatever age that is, and if she does have a boyfriend, like she can, and she can hang out with him, but he has to be here.
Yeah.
He has to have dinner with us. They want to hang out. They want to hang out in my house because I'd rather one identify early on if she's in some type of a toxic relationship. Hopefully not. And then two, it's like, yeah, I want her to feel comfortable enough that she doesn't have to go outside and sneak out or do other things and be here. And I'm sure that will happen no matter what anyway. But at least this way, there's some control, and I get to know the young man.
Speaking of Orthodox,
she goes through that, but yeah.
Judeo-Christian stuff, there's an incredible show on Netflix called Stiesel. It follows a Hasidic Jew family in modern times in Jerusalem, and it is slow paced and unbelievably fascinating and gripping. I'm like completely enamored with all the characters. I just started season 3. So you may find it quite interesting.
Season 3. Oh, it's been okay. So it's been out for a while.
Yeah, well, I think it was a show in Israel, and then they bought the rights.
Netflix bought it. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I was like, wow. I'm like, I've never. Yeah, that makes sense. They do that all the time.
And it's all subtitled.
Yeah, right. Cool.
Because
I'll have to check that out. No, I do not know Hebrew either, or Aramaic, which is what our church sings in. But yeah, no, I mean, so to that, when you started talking about the hedonism and the college thing. So yeah, I mean, and the alcohol thing. Yeah, I want them to be exposed to it. I think I want them to be as much of a controlling environment as possible. At the same time, I think of that little boy and his family who unpackages gifts. I don't know his name, but like makes like $30 million a year. Yeah, he's like makes $30 million a year. And then I'm like, why am I not allowing Martin to have a YouTube show? Like, what's like? I could totally be a producer of this.
There's a couple of Russian kids, Vlad and Nikki, who terrorize their parents in little 10, 15-minute episodes, and the kids loved watching that for a while. And it's tough to think about like where to draw that line, but I think it's like anything, because I'll just speak for myself and my own like sales experience. As soon as people in sales focus on how much money can I get out of this, the whole endeavor is enwrapped in a taint, right? Like it's just sullied with an impure ideal. And I think the same thing kind of comes along with what we're talking about, right? Like if there's even a subconscious like, oh, we're going to get rich off this, you know, then I think that suddenly permeates throughout all the micro interactions you have about it. And then all of a sudden the questions about the likes and the subscriptions and everything carry a weight, and it's a weight from mom and dad, right? In addition to what's already the social pressure and desire and whatever.
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, obviously, I was just
But I
being,
have thought about it.
I was just going for the humor section of it, which again brings me back to the point of like, why is it that she wants a YouTube channel? Like, what content are you creating? Like, Instagram, TikTok. Like, are you just a passerby, or do you actually want to create content? Do you want to improve upon? Because as of right now, I mean, she's 8, so I take it with a grain of salt. She's like, I want to be a baker, but she might be a baker, like, which is great if that's what she wants to be. We all wanted to be different things as we were kids, and I've always believed in just making sure that she has as much as every opportunity as we can provide for her to do the things that I think would fulfill her potential. So if she wants the YouTube show simply because she wants to like bake more and hone her craft, then I'm all for it. It's and part of it honestly has been like, man, like how much stuff. Like she's got karate 2 nights a week. She had soccer that just ended, travel soccer, and then she's got piano, Cub Scouts, and we just went to
Scouts takes
about
a surprising amount of time, by the way.
yeah, we got our first camp out this. I mean, we just started this year, and we even missed a couple camp outs because like the weekends were just too busy, and I felt bad. But I'm like, I can't do all
Also,
this.
they
And
need to completely revamp the popcorn thing. It's
oh
fucking
yeah, we did it. Yeah, we did that. We did that.
$25 for a
months.
thing of popcorn. Here's
Well,
my take on it. I would have had an easier time if I knocked door to door asking for a $25 donation to support my adorable daughter in her Cub Scout uniform. Then, because they get the thing in their hand and they're looking at it, and you can see the cognitive dissonance crush them like an anvil. It's just like there's no way there's no way, and you could see the internal fight. They're like, I can't do it. I just can't do it.
Well, so I was a little bit surprised because, like, we specifically chose her to go to Cub Scouts because one, she had 2 friends in Cub Scouts, and it's boy and girl, which is great. And plus, to me, I nothing against Girl Scouts. I have nieces who did Girl Scouts as girls, but as when they were younger, and I love the cookies, which are only $5 a box, which is what I thought the popcorns would be when we just did
Right.
it. But or at least somewhere around there. And we did so the way we sold it this year, at least our pack, we set up 2 tables at our local grocery store, and we actually made a killing. We ran out of our product.
Hmm.
I think that has to do with the fact that the community was very generous. A lot of people actually just donated without buying anything because it was cheaper to give $5 than to buy a
Right.
$25 bag of popcorn. So we got a lot of those donations coming in, which was nice that they did that, and the kids worked at it. I actually made a snafu at there because when I was there, the sales mentality got ahead of me, and this young boy was there, and we only had like 3 bags of the popcorns, or we had like 1 bag of like whatever like the hot item was. I can't remember what it was because I mean it was like maybe the corn kernel or something. And I just joked with the other parents. I'm like, we should charge like $40 for that because it's the last one. It's a scarcity thing. And like the kid like went up and
Wrote
tossed it
40
up, and
on it.
I just realized I was like, I apologize to him because he's an impressionable young youth, and I was like, that was not a good thing that I said. I was doing it for a cheap laugh, but he was like now getting into that like, oh, we should sell it to make more money, and I'm like, that's not what the spirit of this is as a Cub Scout. And I felt really bad, but at the same time, like the parents were fine, but I told him I was like, I was just doing it for a cheap laugh, and I forgot that there's like like 4 like 8 to 10 year old kids
Impressionable.
that are there who are like, oh, we can make even more money because Mr. Seber over here said like we should charge 40 since it's anyway. But yeah, to your point, I was a little bit surprised. I mean, I talked to a pack leader who was a scout, and he's a great guy. And he's like, yeah, they do end up charging a lot, but he's like, but we ended up selling out. So clearly, it at least in our case, it worked because we ran out of every product that we had brought with us
All the
over the
pop-ups did
course of the day.
exceptionally well. Like the things
Yeah,
we did outside grocery stores and like Tractor Supply, stuff like that. But the one-on-ones with like family and friends
sure.
were just painfully awkward.
Well, it's a lot of money. I mean, I'm like, I'm not, I don't begrudge anyone who'd be like, what?
But
Where's the
again, I don't even
where's
think
the
it's
five
about
dollar
money.
box of like, yeah, where's the $5 box of cookies that I
It
like?
was like it created an anger response as like how dare you? How dare you
Right,
present me with this wild inequity?
right.
Anyway,
So they did explain, I think one of the big things is that they explained that there's no cost to them when you do it this way, which is why the price is so high because like the company that makes them sell it, it's a little bit different than I guess the Girl Scout model. But anyway, we don't need to talk about that. I think I took us into a different topic. But yeah, there's just a lot of projects going on with I think that's I'd love to talk a little bit about this and how your feelings are, not just as girl dads, but um as just any parents. Like today, there are times I just feel overwhelmed. I mean, like this morning, we had an 8:30 piano class, then we had 10 to 11 karate, or it was like 10 to 10:50, and then I had to take her to this basketball thing at the YMCA because they're doing like the tryouts for the teams that'll eventually start after Thanksgiving. And I just feel like every day is a thing. Like there's something like outside of school, and I love that my kids get to do the stuff that I didn't get to do. But at a certain point, I'm like, I grew up okay. Like, yeah, there were things I wanted to be in scouts as a kid. It wasn't my like parents' fault. It was just like it just didn't happen for a multitude of reasons. It wasn't like my parents said no or anything like that. Um, but at the same time, I'm like, Jesus, this is a lot of stuff that's going on.
I've got some friends whose kids I would deem wildly overscheduled. It sounds like you're heavily scheduled. You might even consider yourself overscheduled. Um, but I think it's a cultural thing in those instances, and I don't know if you feel the same. Uh, right now, we're taking a bit of a like let them push approach. So like I've offered up jujitsu or karate or whatever, and they're just like, nah, not right now. We did swimming lessons in the summer. Cece used to dance. She used to do gymnastics. Gavin did gymnastics for a while. And now they're kind of just like petered out a little bit. And so other than Cub Scouts, we don't really actually have that much going on. And I guess the approach that I'm taking on it presently is kind of in line with like your comment, is that I'm looking at their development, and cognitively, emotionally, socially, everything seems like it's on par or ahead of pace. And they're physically very capable. Like they go to the playground, they're up, down, all around doing whatever, right? So I'm like, do they need to be forced into anything now? No. But I know it's maybe a year or two before, actually Cece already has asked about piano lessons. We're going to start that in either December or January. And Gavin wants to do t-ball in the spring, or baseball, he calls it. And so at some point I'm going to have to push back. And I think for me, the way I'm thinking about it is like one instrument, one sport, one like heart opening activity, which is what I would consider Cub Scouts to be, or mind expanding activity, whatever. And then like beyond that, I just think there's a piece of your own health that you have to take into account. Because if I can't sleep, if I can't get anything done of my own, I can't show up as like happy dad fun dad, and then it's like, okay, so if that's not happening, how much does that negate out of the equation?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. Yeah. And I do like the push thing. Like Mardine pushes us for soccer, which is great. I love that because neither Elsie or myself
Are you
are.
doing travel soccer yet?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The second season, yeah, yeah, or second whatever. We started travel soccer in the summer. We also just finished the fall travel soccer, and it's been wonderful. The community is
Nice.
great. The other parents and the kids. We invited them to our Halloween block party that we do because we live on a dead end street, and Elsie always one growing up in Lebanon was like when she came here, she's like, I'm gonna finally have like Halloween experience. We have a home in the suburbs, and I'm like, we live on a dead end street. No kid is coming. Like on our like we get like 2 or 3 kids a year. So her and Jamie, our neighbor, have like set up this huge, which is awesome for the kids. And we ended up inviting more people outside of the neighborhood, like block party, and all the
Very
kids
cool.
come, and yeah, it was really cool. It was fun. But yeah, no, I mean it is good, right? And I love how you frame it in the development standpoint, right? Because there are things that I do see her flourishing in. I was unbelievably shy as a child, which most people can't fathom. Like I wasn't really, like. Luckily, I had some intellect and hard work ethic in school, so like I worked hard, so I was able to get through classes and stuff. But like socially, I was incredibly awkward till after pretty much the middle of my freshman year of college. But I had friends and stuff, but like I wouldn't like I
Tell me
had
about
no
that
idea what to do.
transition, because I remember the story about how you got over that. What was the impetus? Like what drove you to say enough's enough? I'm not living like this.
I don't know if it's what drove me. I think it was, um, and again, this is not a shot at my parents. I think coming outside of my parents' home, when I went off to college, I think that allowed me to be more freeing. I was always good with my close family, meaning I acted very differently because I wasn't afraid. I also, and again, this is not a humble brag. I graduated, unfortunately, at 17 years and like 4 months. My birthday's in February, so I was a good like year or
Did you skip a grade?
sometimes year. Long story short, I went to like 6 different schools before I came to America when I was 8 years old. Like, and the systems in Europe are different, and they wanted to put me in third grade, and my mom was. This was when we were in New Jersey at the time, and she was like adamant that like no, he's like you already finished third grade in Belgium, like why would he like restart third grade? And they're like, well, his English was still not like it was good. I was learning English over there as they all do. Um and then they just tested me, and again, fortunately, unfortunately, whatever it is my life. I did really well on the mathematics and science portion, and they were like, oh, like he can keep up with the work. So they let me stay in the fourth grade, even though, so I didn't really skip. It was just sort of a weird, like, cultural thing. And then because I was a February birthday, and we talk about this now because my youngest daughter is a September 3rd birthday. She's
Hmm.
2 years old, and Elsie's already like on the path of like, she wants, and I'm like, no, I would rather her be the oldest, not the youngest. I went through that. It's not like I had a bad high school experience. I mean, middle school sucks for everybody. At least I feel it does. If it doesn't, God bless. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah,
But
there's always the occasional.
middle school's a weird, like biological test tube situation. But
Honestly, there
um,
should be some kind of societal deference to anybody who's a middle school teacher.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's well, teachers in general, but yeah, middle school is
Middle school teachers should
that
be
is,
paid six
yeah,
figures.
yeah.
The body odor
Do
alone. No one knows what to do yet. Everything's a mess. It's a giant hormone shower.
Yeah, it's yeah. No, God bless teachers. I
Looking
mean,
forward to that, by the way.
there you go. Yeah, but I mean, not again, not to make this about myself. I'm just saying, like, I don't know if there was an impetus. It was more like I went off to college. Luckily I had some really good roommates and friends that I made there, and I just kind of sort of came out of my shell because they were inviting me to their parties. like that we threw parties, and that's a story for another time where I almost got kicked off campus. But anyway, but
Are you sure it's for another time? It might be
yeah,
that.
it could be. Yeah. Well, we were talking about girl dads. I don't know
Oh
if
yeah.
this is the appropriate thing, but um, but yeah, I don't know if there was an impetus. I think
So
I always tell Mardine
the story that
to
you had
talk.
told
Yeah.
me was around getting over rejection in particular.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that was. Yeah, yeah. So
I'm so
right. That's
impressed with just the
yeah,
chutzpah required to go after an endeavor like that. Could you share a little bit about it and what
yeah,
that
absolutely. Yeah,
specifically was?
sure. Sorry, that's the story you meant. I thought you meant yeah. So yeah, I dated like one girl in high school, and didn't work out. It was not anything. And then really didn't really date at all afterwards. And then when I got off to college, obviously there was a lot of women. I went to BU. It was literally 2-to-1 ratio of
Oh,
girls to
wow.
boys.
No kidding.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. I
It's an ad for
finally
BU right.
I have a chance, maybe. But no, I mean, I was, obviously um, going out. So yeah, so I wanted to psych myself. I was talking to my at the time freshman year roommate Jeremy, and he's a great guy. Unfortunately, passed at the age of 30 from prostate cancer, but that's a different story. Not to be a bummer about that, but he was a great guy. He affected my life in many ways, and we were talking, and I was like, I'm going to try this thing, and he's like, and he was very supportive.
Where'd you come
Really,
up with the idea? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I just remember being sick and tired of not having a girlfriend. And it was for a girlfriend. This wasn't like just to be
Hookup thing.
over, it wasn't like a hookup thing. It was just like, I was just tired of like just not having experienced that part of my life, especially after it wasn't like the first week freshman year, just to be clear. It was like, as I got out of my shell freshman year in college, I just was like, my friends who we started going to parties, and I started becoming more and more the Rudy that you know today, not the shy Rudy who quivers in the corner of a room because like people walk into their suite and he just has no idea what to say or do. Uh, like this mouth actually shut up at some point in this life. But yeah, it was more like I was like, this is stupid. Like I want a girlfriend. So yeah, what I ended up doing was I tested myself um, to I challenged myself to ask a different girl, assuming I also was negative in my head. I assumed that they would all say no. Um, I challenged myself for like 7 days to ask out a different girl, any girl that I would meet, either in class or whatever, that obviously I would find attractive, and just be like, hey, like, I would love to. Hi, my name's Rudy. Could I have your number? Remember digits back then? I don't know
Yeah.
now. I don't know if kids ask for
They get
numbers
you
now. I don't know
digits.
what yeah, but
They just bump iPhones and trade like.
right, yeah. I don't even know what that. But could I get your number? I'd love to, go out for coffee or something. I forget what I exactly said. I still remember the first girl I asked it to, and I remember the other ones too. But like the first one, I just remember. I'm pretty sure I was physically shaking, but I like got myself mentally to like say those words to her. Could not tell you her name, but or any of the others. Actually, most of them said yes, but I think they gave me fake numbers because I never actually ended up going on a date with them. Most, like I would say like it was like 50-50 yes, no, but like nothing ever came out of them. It was more just to psych myself out from the rejection as I was getting to know other friends. And then I ended up dating a girl who I was friends with just from mutual friends and some other girls as well. Nothing that ever turned out serious. I was never the guy who, like, I never understood guys who were like, who would date and like, not, it's not that they hope that it wouldn't go well. Like, I get like if you're trying to hook up with someone at a club, but like, for me, it was like, it's not like I dated every girl thinking like, oh, I'm going to marry her, but it just like, but I always, my dating mentality was always like, I'm dating you. I hope it works out. I hope you're my soulmate and best friend. It might not be, but
I was
like,
a
I hope it
serial
does.
monogamist as well.
Right. Like I just didn't, I never understood like goes on a date and goes like, man, I hope this doesn't work out. Like that, because that to me is what the opposite of that is. Like, I guess if you're just trying to,
I guess that's
um,
kind of the unspoken,
yeah, like
right? Yeah.
it's just weird. Like, it's like, why wouldn't you want this person to be the best person in your life and
Well,
to
and
be with
I have to
forever? But
presume it's because of number one, broken culture, number two, broken spirituality, and number three, broken like just internal self worth and connection to your own principles and values and concept of what this world is, what you want, yada yada yada. I think we went through a pretty terrible part of that in the second half of the 20th century. I really think we hollowed out our food system, our spiritual systems. Like there's just the 80s in particular were just a mess. And of course that's what at least I was born like directly into. Um anyway, that was a hell of an aside, but it's the kind of thing that I think about sometimes, like what is the equivalent for my kids in terms of what is the thing that they're so terrified to even consider that will eventually become their Achilles heel later, you know? Because if I hadn't been in sales and had to go through God knows how many rejections, right? Because it was the only possible way to move forward is to have people not respond to you, hang up on you, right? Whatever. I actually can't fathom how different of a person I would be, because that would have boxed me so back, like deep into a corner, that I would have been terrified of my own shadow, probably.
yeah, it's, I mean, it's really hard for people to get over it. And I worry about that for our kids because, like, to your point, I remember something just came back in my mind. An article a long time ago I read where the dad was like saying, I want you to say no to my daughter for selling Girl Scout cookies. Like, I want her to experience knocking on a door and someone just saying, no, I don't want your
Thank you.
cookies.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was thinking about, the whole Cub Scouts and the $25 bag of popcorn, which probably makes it a lot easier for people to say no. But yeah, I mean, I think about the same thing, especially for Mardine. It's not that we spoil her, at least in the way I think. Certainly, my parents think I spoil her
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they
of
never
course.
did
Every
any of the stuff that
generation.
I did.
Uh,
They all think, and I'm like, well, no, I'm just giving her the opportunities to flourish, and because like for them, and it's not that they didn't love us, it was like, why are you always like taking her places? And I'm like, because that's where her classes are. Anyway,
right.
uh, different
Why do you
story.
give her food
But
every
it's,
day?
yeah, what do you give it? Yeah, yeah. It's like, well, that actually I do. I am stepping down on this. It's like I remember hearing about this, and we started like I remember hearing about parents who make like four different dishes a night because every kid needs to eat like something different, and that like really pissed me off, and I was like, what? Like unless you have like some kind of allergic
Allergy, right?
dietary restriction, of course, like that's absolutely, but it's like otherwise it's like, no, this is dinner. You don't just, this is not a restaurant. You don't get to
Right.
pick like five things. We made this dish, we're sharing it as a family, and if you don't want to eat it, that's fine. You just don't get anything else. Like that's what you have to eat. But we have
Gavin's
started,
gone to bed hungry a
yeah,
few times.
yeah, but I mean there have been times where I've broken that rule out of sheer just like I just
Exhaustion.
don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's just whatever. Here's your
Because there's a
PBJ.
cost, right?
Yeah, there's a cost. Right, there's a cost. I'm like,
And
here's
you
your
have to be
PBJ.
willing to
Leave me
pay the
alone. Right,
price.
right.
And it's a lot of tears, and it's a lot of like moping and dragging feet and
But that whole aside leads me to what you were talking about, which is, especially from the sales world, the rejection, and how do you teach them about that? Because there is, this we talk. I mean, we talk. We're not the first ones to talk about it, but like even like the participation trophies, which
Mhm.
I was very glad at least this time in soccer, they all got like a medal, but like there were two girls in her team well deservedly
MVP
received
kind of thing.
trophies for like MVP, well deserved. And I was like, and I was happy to see that because I was like, even though Mardine didn't get it, I was like, yes, this makes sense. I want her to
Yes,
recognize that, like, it's not that she's not up to par. It's not that you've done anything wrong, but we
there
need
is
to be
an
able to
ideal.
see other people and not
Demonstrate
just think about
excellence.
yourself and drum. Yes, exactly. And applaud that excellence and be
Yes,
like, wow, that's really great. It's not a comparison thing. It's not putting you down. It's like, that's how we grow, right? We get better through that. And I want to do more of that. And especially with, so I know we're talking about girls' dads and stuff like this, but we were talking about this in I'm going to make some tangents, but they do tie all back into this, which is like, so this team, so I work on the financial services majors team in my company, which is just this team, pre-sales people who are like trying to fix it on financial services. Um, there was only one woman on our team. There was like five of us. There's one. And there's amazing women at my company and like really smart and talented, but like none of them, raise their hand. And it's a big issue. Like we see this all the time, especially from like other areas. And there's been studies on this, not that I've done, but like I've read about, and I read about these because I want my daughters and I try to model myself as this in my workplace so that when they get to the workplace, it's going to be a lot easier for them. I hope, because I try to model this. But like, I remember one of our leaders had asked me, he's like, hey, can you do like a 5-minute update on our quarterly global call about your team? Which I don't consider myself the leader. I'm the facilitator. I mean, I am the team lead, but we're doing this as part of in addition to our day jobs. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was getting more women in there. And I'm like, wait a second. And I realized this to myself as he asked me this. It's like, why am I the one asking this? Like, the woman on my team should be the one speaking and asking this to get I put this in there and I feel, and she's amazing. Oh my God, she's so good at what she does. Rebecca, I
yeah.
think you know her. I just didn't want to be mindful of people's privacy, but, and she's so good. And I was like, you should do this 5 minutes on the global all hands call. Like, not me. Like, you should be the one because we want more women coming in. But the research and stuff talks about this, and I see this in my own daughter, who I've never trained other than with a growth mindset. Is that women believe if they don't have 100% of the qualifications for the job, not, I don't want to stereotype all women. Obviously, there's,
What is a woman?
but according to the research, yeah. But according to the research, is like they won't sign up. Whereas like men are somehow like, oh, I fit like 65% of that job. I could do that. Like, and
Yep.
that's, but when I read the study, I was like, that is sort of like what I do.
Oh,
Like, because
100%.
I always feel like I can learn the other stuff.
Well, how
I've
else are
never
you
been
going to
told
learn?
not to. Right. But I see this in my 8-year-old who like gives up on something because she can't do it perfectly. And I look at her and I'm like, I know it's not me or your mom who's like ingrained this in you, because
Hmm.
I certainly sit down with her and I tell her, I mess up all the time. You should see what I do at work. Like I tell her, I was like, you know how much times I make mistakes. I remember telling her when she was in 5th grade, she was 5 years old, she was in kindergarten. And I told her like this is before I started at my current company, but when I was a strategy consultant, and I was like, she's like, what do you do for work? Like she's trying to, and I was like, well, I do sometimes workshops to teach adults how to like do their job or like think about a problem. And she just started laughing. She's like, oh, like Bubba, like adults don't need teachers. And I'm like, and I just started laughing, going, you are so wrong about
Yeah,
that.
that's the most
Like,
naive thing you've said
right. Like,
in
I
your
was like,
short life, my dear.
and I just laughed, and I hope I didn't, laugh too much where she felt bad about it, because I explained, I was like, no, Bubba, I was like, I need teachers all the time. I learn from other people. Adults always need teachers. Like, I don't want you to think that, because that makes it sound like we're gods and we have all the answers. And I'm like, that is not the case at
You know
all.
what's been so
Um,
beautiful? How much the kids have been teaching us. And in unexpected ways. Like, not even the one thing I expected, just because I had read about it and, seen it on Instagram or whatever, is their ability to sort of drag you into the moment, assuming that you're willing, because I know there's some parents who are just incapable, not because they're bad people, but because of anxiety or stress or whatever. But if you let them, they will pull you out of your left brain hellscape and reintroduce you to the wonder that is this Garden of Eden we all occupy, where seeds just go in the ground and then make a fucking plant from the sun. Like, there's just absolute wonder all around us all the time, and we become so damn jaded to it. And they're there like these little, I don't know, like little wise people, the dumbest little wise people. It's not that they're dumb; they're just ignorant.
They're
right?
not dumb. They're not. Yeah, I
No,
guess
they're not dumb. They're
uninformed. I feel like ignorant is not.
Ignorant is uninformed.
Ignorant is the word. Ignorant is uninformed. Yeah.
Be exposed to the information, right?
Right.
Like people who, like, for instance, my family and just the general place I came from, north central Massachusetts, nobody traveled internationally. Like, people barely left the state. A big trip was going up to, the beach in New Hampshire. So if you get exposed suddenly to international culture, you're going to look like a ham-fisted gorilla, when it's not that, like, you're stupid or an asshole. It's just literally you're ignorant because you have absolutely no concept of anything outside your little bubble. Anyway, so I've been overjoyed with that, but it's not just that. Because they're learning at such a different pace than we did, I also find that, like, they've got really interesting tools of how they assimilate information. Like, one of the cool things that Meg started doing was asking Cece, like, how did you come to that conclusion? Like, how did you get that answer? And really getting her to, expose her own thought processes. And some of the times I'm like, damn, that was fucking clever. And it's almost like helping even me expand my mind about, like, how I can go about problem solving.
Yeah.
But yeah, anybody who thinks that you're ever done learning is in for a world of hurt. I just don't know how you could live anything other than a life of suffering, because you're going to constantly be thinking that you're king shit, and everybody's just going to be, like, offended by you, because obviously no one is.
Right.
And I think that's one of the greatest things you notice about an extraordinary leader, like a true leader, is the humility that just drips off of them, Yeah. Like, I remember meeting Brad Smith and Scott Cook from Intuit, two of the most brilliant minds in tech and business. And I mean, they walk into a room and they might as well have been fucking Columbo. Just like, just the questions and with no need to look like the smartest person there. None. Now, when they spoke, they often would sound like it because they were, but it's that the lack of ego, the lack of fear of being dethroned. And that's an interesting thing to consider. Like, how do you instill that in kids? Because it's an interesting battle, right? If you are trying to raise someone to weather the onslaught of middle school and high school, there's a part of you that needs to bolster the ego in some way. Because if they don't feel confident and whole in themselves and like they're worth something, then they're going to get a meteor shower crushed upon them, especially if we're talking about social media. And if you have anything unique about you, right, forget it, because now you're going to stand out and people are going to always find a way to weaponize that. But at the same time, how do you do that without creating an egomaniacal narcissist? It's an interesting balance to have to play.
I think, like most things, it takes a lot of, just like any other change that you're trying to push through, it's going to take a lot of time and effort as we go through this journey with them, at least during their development years. I mean, ideally, they're always developing, as you said, always learning. But yeah, no, it's going to be hard. I mean, I look forward to it because I think it'll be exciting as well. Obviously, it's going to be hard for them. I remember again my middle school and high school years, but I think as long as you push them, I mean, the hardest lesson. So Jeremy, my freshman year roommate in college, the hardest lesson he taught me was, and sort of what the catalyst has led me to my life here and to all the things that I've been able to accomplish was I was working stuffing envelopes at the admissions office at BU as a work study job. And I was always very tech handy in the sense of like, I love computers, I love technology, I loved engineering, math, science, like working on stuff. But I was at the freshman year, I was a psych major, which really was undecided. And then I turned into economics. But Jeremy was a math major, math and philosophy, actually. He was a double major. And he was very smart, hardcore Linux guy, super good coder. And him and I would always talk, and he'd be like, "Dude, why are you like stuffing envelopes at admissions? Not that there's anything wrong with that." He's like, "You love computers, like go do tech support. Like you could do tech support easily." And I was like, I laughed at him. I was like, "No, like I'm not even a comp sci major. Like I'm not even the other thing." He's like, go fucking put your name down and interview. And I remember going through the interview, and the questions were like so basic to me. And I was like, this can't be the interview. And the guy was like, yeah, you got the job. It's like, when did you start? And it was like $3 more an hour than I was making because it's,
Which back
it's
then was a
IT,
lot.
which back then was a lot, was a lot. I was very excited. I think it was like $11 an hour or something
I was
back
gonna
in
say
2000.
minimum wage was like
Um,
$4.85 or something. Like it was 5.20.
well, this was Mass. I don't think it was that low, at least in Boston. Maybe Boston was. I don't know. I remember making like 10, 50, $11 an hour. Anyway, um, which was great. I was so happy with that. Plus, I loved the work. I mean, it was so much more fulfilling to me than stuffing envelopes. But I think to your point, it's that lesson about it. How do you do it without the humility? I think for me, it was, I came from a humble place just because I didn't have the self confidence initially until I went off to college to do the things that I did, even though academically I was, I felt good about like doing tests and other things like that. But socially, I didn't feel confident. I think you just have to guide them in that trying to explain. And I'm very overt about everything. Like I just explained to Mardine, I was like, just Mardine, like you did a great thing. Just so you know, just because you did it great, like, you've been practicing or you had some innate ability. Not everybody has that ability. Not everybody can do that. Just like you don't have their ability to do other things. Like some people are better at X, Y, and Z. And that's okay. You can learn to get there if you really want to,
Mm.
but you should be aware of that. And it's not that you're better. It's just that we're all, we all have different skill sets and you have to figure out how that best complements what you're trying to do. You want to be a baker, so you got to bake every day or do some recipes or learn more about measurements and understand the science behind baking. If that's what interests you, that's what you have to focus on. And I think that the hard part is the other people, right? That's where it always comes down to. It's like you do that in your microcosm of home, but then you send them out into the real world. And there are always going to be people. I think the harder lesson for us and all parents is not so much teaching these things that we may or may not know. And I know not every parent knows what we know, Matt, and just like we don't know some of the things that other parents know that we could benefit from. But I think the hardest part is how do we teach them to handle the rejection and the making fun of or on that uniqueness or pulling
Hmm.
out from like other kids. Like how do we teach them to be strong and confident about like, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. It's okay. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to look stupid because you're not. You're learning.
You're
Stupid
ignorant.
people are the ones who don't, right. They're the ones who pretend to know, like shake their head and, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like that's useless. That doesn't help anybody. Especially the people you think you're trying to help. But um,
So let
how
me
do we
ask you
teach
a
that? I
hard
don't know.
question.
How do we teach that? Yeah, go ahead.
So if we take a look at the midterm elections that just happened,
Mm-hmm.
I think it wouldn't take that discerning of an eye to say that abortion law was an enormous driver in the outcome of what we just saw. And obviously, having a daughter, I care a lot about her having liberty over her own body, especially in the instance of something that has happened that is not of her desire or control, or her life or her baby's life is at risk. Like, that goes without saying even a little bit to me. So I'm very much a pro-choice guy. But I also feel like we probably shouldn't be getting abortions very often. And my question for you is, how do you think as a society, because you seem like a guy who's interested in civil discourse, how do we walk back from this like ridiculously polarized edge where that what I just said is no one's platform? Like, no one is talking about, like, yes, you should have bodily autonomy, but also can we stop with like the reckless abandon, lack of self-control, lack of personal accountability, where we're ending children's lives early. Like, that is what it is. Like, whether or not it's legal or ethical, whatever is like, I think Bill Burr's got the bit about it. It's like, you put a cake in the oven. If you leave it there until it's done baking, you're going to have a cake. If you take it out early, you don't have a cake. So it's like, it just is what it is. But the specifics of this aren't even really that important. What I'm really getting at is, this is like the third rail, right? In terms of people's inability to have calm discourse about something. And I look to the future for our kids and the world that they're going to come into. And I think to myself, like, how can I be, because I'm not one who thinks that you can really change that much outside your general sphere of influence, but I interact with people all the time and I have deep conversations a lot. How do you think as a society we can start to broach these things in a way that is not immediately combustible, so that we can actually start to understand each other's side?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, like you, I think I share a lot of the same beliefs. Want my daughters to have, you know, the control over their bodies, pro-choice in that manner. I mentioned earlier in the show, I do come from a deeply religious faith and background, which makes it to me personally, as a just myself, not to impose on others, just like anything else. One of the greatest things I love about this country more than anything else is its separation of church and state, which is something that we didn't have back in other places where my family grew up and came out of. But I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's an important discussion. So not just abortion, to your point. So again, I think I do agree with the intent of what you said, which is, yeah, I would like it to be, I forget what the old saying was, they should be legal, they should be safe, and there should be less of them.
Yeah, legal, safe, and rare.
Legal, safe, and rare, right? I mean, I don't think any woman is really growing up going like, woohoo, can't, like, I want to get abortions. There's no judgment in my statement there to them. That's, again, it's between them. It's their body, their choice, what they're doing. But I think to your point is like, when you and I, especially, and as the establishment would see it, as like two white men talking about this, would seem like, oh, like, how dare you? Like, you don't have a uterus, you don't have any of those things.
It's a great multiplier on what I'm saying, is that, like,
right,
we're not even allowed to be entered into the
conversation. We're not even allowed to be entered into the conversation. And this is where I would actually push back, not to make the choice. Again, the choice is all on the woman. You can say this like 50 times probably over the next 2 minutes. That's not what we're talking about. But I do think, like, look, you are my sister, you are my mother, you are my aunt, you are my cousin. I have so many women I love in my life. I would want to be a part of their lives. And this would be a part of their lives as well. So I'd want to be there to be supportive in whichever way I could be, an ally, not just a silent one, right? Because that's what oftentimes we're seen as, like, oh, I'm an ally. But most allies, who are not of, like, if you're an ally of women or an ally of this, you're kind of silent, but like, you want to speak up, you want to have that discourse, you want to be able to and I wouldn't even call it, I guess, yeah, it is discourse. I mean, just having that discussion, as you said. The broader question is, how do we talk about anything without, killing each other, or making it seem like we hate the other one's core values, which is, I think, where it's gotten really bad. And I feel like it's so unnecessary, like 99% of the time. I feel like it should be unnecessary 100% of the time, but I feel like 99% of the time when I see these discourses, like, people get truly offended as if like they're attacking. And I think it really has to do with a lack of communication ability, where people are taking things personally, where they're talking about abstract concepts and they seem like that they're attacking that person across from them because they're just talking about, like you and I are just talking about this subject. And I have two daughters. I would like them to live in a pro-choice world where, at the end of the day, I have no idea what will happen. I hope, but I'm not afraid to say that I hope that they never have to have an abortion. That doesn't mean that I would
Right.
love them less or treat them any. But why would I not hope for that? Like, who's growing up going like, oh yeah, I can't wait till my daughter
The
has their
thing
first.
that tipped
Like,
me off, that made me
that's
start
what.
to feel
Yeah.
like we're sliding off the track, is I went and I saw multiple female comedians who like announced that they had had an abortion on stage, and there was a like screaming round of applause in the like arena. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? Like,
Well, I think part of that, and this is just my conjecture on that, is I I would hope, and I'm sure there were some people who were screaming about, the exact reason that you think, which is that they're screaming about, like, yeah, way to go, you got an abortion. But I think the majority of those people, I'd like to believe, like greater than 90%, that's just my heart, like to believe that they're celebrating, which I celebrate too, the ability for those female comedians to talk openly about it without the stigma, without getting
so
banned,
here's the
without
piece that
getting.
I'm leaving out. It was talked about as if it was like, I just got a new car. Like, it was spoken about in a way that was celebratory, as opposed to like, I'm sharing with you something that was hard that I had to go through. Because if it was the latter, I wouldn't even be having this conversation. And I would agree with you.
Yeah. So again, I wasn't there on those specific ones. I have seen female comedians like talk about it. I forget which comedian who talked about it. I thought she did a fantastic, amazing job. She was on SNL. I don't know if you saw that skit where she dresses up like a clown, and she talks about basically having an abortion, but she doesn't talk about it as having an abortion. Like, she just had to have like an abortion in her life, and about the privacy. And again, I'm all in support of my sisters and my, meaning just women in general, if that they shouldn't feel stigmatized. They should, and pro-choice, feel open to that. I agree with you. I don't think it's something like it should be celebrated. I think, I mean, but it shouldn't be like, this is where it gets like into that tricky
Yeah. It
situation
shouldn't
where
be
it's like, we say something
denigrated.
like that, it shouldn't be denigrated.
Right.
I'm not saying that, but at the same, divorce. My mom was divorced.
Right. Nobody
Huge
should
cultural,
celebrate divorce. Be like,
huge,
yeah, get that
huge.
bitch.
Well, right. But I mean, like, so huge cultural, like, faux pas, especially in my cultural
Yeah.
circle
And
and
coming
religious
from a
background.
Catholic
Like,
background, similar thing. It's
yeah,
like,
like
you're
huge, like
suffering together for the rest
really,
of your lives.
right, like really, like, and now it's like, oh, you're divorced, like who cares? Oh, you got a stepdad, like, but like, I remember growing up and being like, how are you doing? Like, oh, poor Rudy, he doesn't have a dad. Like, until my mom remarried, and I have a wonderful father. But like that would be like, because there was a stigma to like not having a father because you're divorced and you have a single mom, and like there was all that stigma. And I certainly don't want abortion, especially if any of my girls ever have to, which again, I want them to have that choice. um it's not degenerate. What did you say? Generated. I just lost
Denigrated.
the word. Denigrated, thank you, sorry, denigrated. um but I think about it like divorce for my mom was, and divorce for a lot of people were, just even like 30 years ago. Just the stigma, and even worse, like even before then, where it was not talked about or like seen
Right.
as something you had to hide. And I it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be denigrated. But at the same time, to your point, it's like, okay, you got divorced. Like we're happy you're now happier because you're divorced. And certainly I'm not including like abusive relationships or something. I'm just talking about
Yeah.
like vanilla divorce where it's like, you
This
guys
just
just
doesn't
couldn't
work.
make it work. It just doesn't work out. I'm not talking about spousal abuse or anything like that. That's a whole separate category of that. Of course, that I would uh, anyway. Um, but if it doesn't work out, like it goes back to my whole thing about when I was dating. I was like, I never understood people who were like, "Oh, I hope this doesn't work out." Like that's the thing.
Right.
Like it's not like you get like, why would you get excited? Like, woohoo! I just got like divorced. The guy I thought I was married to, I had 2 kids with, who I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Well, it turns out we don't really get along anymore. We don't want to go. Like, why would you celebrate that? It shouldn't be,
Right.
you know, it shouldn't be denigrated, but it shouldn't be celebrated either. Like it just is. It's
Let's
just
come
something
back
that
to
it
the
shouldn't be.
the
Yeah. Anyway,
concept of the dialogue around it. Like,
so I think a lot of that has to do with just like people feel unheard. I'm sure if somebody watches this, they might misinterpret some of our words and think like, "Oh, you guys aren't really pro-choice, or you aren't doing that." And I'm like, absolutely not. I would vote in every direction to make sure that that right was protected and upheld for all women, including my daughters. Um, but at the same time, I think having the ability to, and it's not a judgment, just to talk about it in any way, just like we're talking about it from a divorce standpoint. I mean, what if the Supreme Court said, divorce was illegal all of a sudden, like you can't divorce? And there were, like, by the way, like 50, 60 years ago in states where you couldn't divorce unless there was infidelity, or like the person was a mental
you need a
patient, or there was like
cause.
spousal, but
Yeah.
you needed cause. Like now you can do for like no cause. So there were restrictions for legal divorce back in the day in this country. Um, and and I think that's ridiculous. I mean, not ridiculous, but I mean, like, I certainly would never support anything like that. But it goes back to just understanding that we as people, the assumptions that people make, like if you're talking to somebody else when I'm having a discourse conversation, it's like, look, they're clearly passionate about that subject. They're not attacking me because they don't know me. How could they be attacking me? I'm not attacking you. I don't like to attack anybody, because how would that even work? I don't know you. If you said something horrible about me, I mean, Matt, you do know me. We're friends actually, but I'm saying, like, and I would like to have that, back and forth conversation. But I think oftentimes, people hear their own insecurities and their own attacks in words that are never meant for anything other than, look, I'm just stating my truth as I see it from that perspective. Um, it doesn't mean I don't support you. It doesn't mean that I judge you. It doesn't mean any of those things. It's just like, how are we supposed to get better if we can't talk about these really, really complex and ethical issues? And don't you want someone to be able to just not just be a silent person who just nods their head with everything, but actually helps question and raise the bar on the dialogue, provide that discourse to be able to raise those arguments and make the case even stronger for what your opinions are. Um, and sadly, I think we've gotten too tribal in many ways, which is why it makes it a little bit more difficult, because people do sometimes get into like these one issue categories. Like I'll say that my mom, hardcore Republican, she thinks she is not pro-choice at all. Very against all this, and not just because she's my mom, like, but I understand where she comes from. I disagree with it, and I
Right.
would fight it with my vote and my voice as I do. But she's not a bad person just because she disagrees with me on this one thing, because her her reasoning for that disagreement, I
Is
don't disagree with that.
right. It's a
Like that's her,
personal assessment.
it's her personal assessment of something that is frankly quite, like, it's quite a difficult question to talk about. I mean,
One of the interesting things about, I'll say, the left's approach to criticizing the right is how much they demean the right's interest in religion. And why I find that amusing or interesting is that I look at so much of the collapse of our society culturally that we're seeing around us. And what do I mean by that? I mean rising violence, rising broken homes, rising abortions, rising drug overdoses, highest, prescriptions for antidepressants and anxiety medication. We're high up there on the top list of countries for suicides, right? Like, there's a lot that's not going great if you take a step back. Greatest country in the world is it's a nice concept, but it doesn't necessarily hold up on the data. And I think a lot of what has fallen apart is two things. One is a lack of community that used to be generated in a church, and a support system that would help you if you fell down and gave you guidance when you were astray. And then two is like, what are you putting up as your North Star, right? I appreciate that there's a lot of things that I only know Christianity well enough to speak about it. I don't know Islam or Judaism to speak really wholeheartedly about it, or other religions for that matter. But like, to want to become like Christ is a pretty damn good North Star. Now, are people behaving like that? Are they hypocrites? Is a totally different discussion, right? And I agree with the criticism in that case. But what are we putting up as the ideal in place of that? And I fear that what's happening is these new age ideologies get stuck there. And that becomes the ideal, because the nature abhors a vacuum, right? There needs to be something that you're constantly principally aligned against. And so that's something I find fascinating, is that the argument against anybody who's conservative is like, oh, you're a Bible thumping, Trump loving, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, that's how we're going to debate this, quote unquote. But to your point, it's like weaponizing personal attacks as opposed to actually having something productive as a discussion, where you're authentically trying to understand the other person's point of view.
Yeah, and it's hard. That's why it's worthwhile. My best friend of 26 years voted for Trump twice, I'm pretty sure. He is not a bad person. I love him like a brother. I disagree with him on that point, to me, and I don't want to make this about Trump per se. I'm just saying, like, I just personally, I disagreed with those outcomes, but I understood those reasons, because a lot of us, we live in very fortunate bubbles. I can certainly say you and I do, Matt.
Yeah.
I can't speak to everyone listening to this podcast, but we live in very fortunate bubbles in a community where, hey, look what we're doing on a Saturday night. This is the kind of luxury that we have, is to be able to have even just this dialogue is a luxury from that perspective. And I don't disagree with you that there's a lot of people who are suffering, but it's really hard. What is it? The opposite of love is not hate, but it's indifference. I forget who said that, but that's so that whole cancel culture, like, just like you hear one thing that is just, that you're so against. And it's not that you're not wrong to be against that one thing. But like, context is key. Like, there needs to be some understanding of, like, why are people doing this? Like, it's not that I refuse to believe, like, especially as you said, and I don't want this to be like a left bashing show, but because I'm a Democrat. I mean, I'm proud to be
a registered Democrat who's found himself
a
Republican suddenly. Like,
right. I'm saying it's more about, have the time to have those worthwhile discussions. Just because, like, having it being dismissed just because somebody has been attacking you, you should have those discussions. I mean, I recently ran for school committee. By the way, I don't think I've told you, I totally I lost on that school
That's
committee
all
thing
right.
on the race. No, I
Congratulations
mean,
on your
it's
time back.
thank you. Yes, thank you. No, it was I won't get into it here for all the reasons, but it was a humbling experience, and I have many. I hope to have many ways that I will continue to support my community because community, as you so stated, is so important. This is where I'm raising my daughters. This is where a lot of my friends are raising their kids, and other neighbors that I've gotten to meet who are wonderful, and this town is wonderful because the people are wonderful. But there were people that were, vehemently against me. And from day one, I said, please reach out to me. Let's talk. Let's find out why you're might be not against me. Sorry, that was incorrect. They couldn't be against me. They didn't know who I was. They can't reject me. You don't know who I am. But they may have not agreed with some of the decisions that I would have made, and hence why I didn't get elected, which is again a different story, but makes sense. But I always wanted to have the discussion. Like, tell me. There was a person who I knew actually came to me at one of these meet and greets and I know him from years past. I went to high school with him. And he told me, I'm actually voting for the other guy, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about this. And I said, thank you, was my first thing. Thank you for not just voting for the other guy and not talking to me first. I mean, if you end up still voting for him, great, but thank you for just giving me the opportunity to actually have the dialogue and not just dismissing me because you just didn't agree with one or two things that I had said.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about it. And if you still disagree, that's okay. That's what that's supposed to be, right? Like, we're not all supposed to agree. That would be a really boring world, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would just be really bad. But people don't have that mentality. They want to be in a vacuum. They want to be in a um, they want to be just with the people who agree with them a lot of the times. It's a tough question you've asked. I know we've been spending like 30 minutes on this. Like, I don't know. It starts, I really believe it starts with that one conversation. It's like everything else in change management. Just have that one conversation. Just like you and I are having this right now in this podcast. It's not meant to attack anybody. We're not doing this. We're overt about our intentions. We're trying to bring this up because we want to have collegial discourse about important matters to help elevate both sides on the reasoning of their arguments. And it's okay that we don't always agree at the end, but we shouldn't have to hate each other. There's, that makes no sense. There's no reason to hate each other. We're not within reason. Obviously, there's going to be extreme examples where I would raise up arms or something, but extreme examples. I mean, not to.
I had a friend of mine who we were pretty close for a very long time, and he was alt-right in the actual sense of the word. He's the only person I've known to actually be it. And I knew him to be that way for years. Not a lot of years, but several years. And I stayed in touch with him because it was so eye-opening for me. First of all, because I cared about him and I thought that he was unwell. Because if you end up that far off the edge on either side, you're probably unwell, just to be honest. And it was so informative, Rudy, to understand how he thought. Like, because he's also, just like Kanye West just went on this whole like anti-Semitic thing, right, about the Jews and blah, blah, blah. He felt very similarly. And while I disagree with the conclusion that he's come to, there is like, okay, so 2% of the U.S. is Jewish population. If you look at banks, media, and entertainment, there's a wildly disproportionate amount of Jewish people who have control over basically the things that run the country. That's interesting. It doesn't mean there's some grand cabal and the Jews are trying to run the world and tank this and destroy that. Like, those are not the same thing. But it is a really dangerous thing. And this is what's interesting about the country, where you're not allowed to question anything anymore. You're not allowed to pose an open question. He helped me expand my mind in ways I never would have dared, which was useful to understanding how do you get the Proud Boys? Like, how does this happen? Because if you can't understand it, then you can't have a dialogue with somebody about it unless it's somebody that you know very closely. Whereas now I feel like I can approach people on any end of any spectrum and at least understand the construct of how they got there. And that helps me feel personally a lot more at peace entering into the conversation because there's no threat, right? I think if you don't understand where people are coming from, or at least aren't willing to find out, then you're looking across from an alien who, you know, if you're going from this tribal state that we're talking about, it represents the ultimate threat, the unknown, the unknowable. It's like, who knows what the fuck else you think if you think that?
And so, to your point, so a few things here. So, abhorrent comments on Jewish and anti-Semitism is abhorrent. To your point about bringing it back about like we can't even ask the question. I think we get into a chicken and egg, and I think we've gone full circle to our first question like an hour ago, which is about the usage of social media and the weaponization of that. Because the reality is, I think part of the reason why, quote unquote, we can't ask the question anymore, or just pose it, even though a rational human would know that that's anti-Semitic rhetoric, that's abhorrent, and that's not based in fact that you're listening to. But at the same time, as you said, well, right, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not trying to do anything like that, but maybe I just want to ask a question, but I'm scared to do so because I'm immediately going to be labeled. I think part of those issues is because of the weaponization of social media. And it's a danger that I worry about for all kids, not just our daughters, because it's too easy to go out there and just Jesus. We were just talking about this with Twitter and Elon's whole thing and the verified mark and $20 billion lost off. I mean, and that's just money off of a ledger that was fake anyway. Like we're talking about actually like shaping hearts and minds for impressionable youth in a way that is unprecedented in human history. The flow of information. I mean, we thought you and I growing up in the 90s and having that 28.8 and 56 point U.S. robot was it a U.S. robotics modem? That's what I had on my. Yeah, of course it was because that was like the creme de la creme of modems. That was on my Christmas wish list. But the U.S. robotics 56K modem, and you know, we thought we were getting information back then, but now that it's so weaponized, I do think it's a hard question, right? Like, I mean, just going back, it's like, it's hard. Like one of the things one of our congressmen, Cicilline, in Rhode Island, you know, I think he said something very well, which is that, look, at the same time, like, we can't just stand by. If you hear this information, you do have to stand up and provide retorts to it, challenge it. Like, you know, just be like, look, oh, you heard this? Well, that's actually not true. You know, yes, it might be that like 50 years ago, it's not that, or maybe, yes, there's some violent crimes in certain areas that have gone up, but it's not. Challenge ourselves. I mean, my dad was a reporter when he first started off, and that whole industry, at least print journalism, died, and now he's in a different career. But I remember when I was a kid, he was just telling me, he's like, Rudy, like, and I'm sure this stat he made up as well, which is something I don't believe. He's like 92% of everything you hear is false. And I'm sure even that stat was false.
Percent of statistics are made up on the spot. So
right. There you go. Right. So, but it really stuck with me as a kid because, you know, as a journalist, he was always like, look, you try to be objective. Obviously, there's just no way to be 100% objective. Even computers can't be 100% objective. We could talk about AI biases and other artificial intelligence biases, et cetera. But, you know, I think there is that weaponization. And I think you and I having a fireside chat or with other friends about those discussions in a congenial manner is acceptable. To ask those questions, as you said, like that would be appropriate to ask. I think once it goes out into the world, as this podcast is going to, it'll, I'm sure, raise a lot of eyebrows, and people will just be like, you know, what? And I oftentimes just go like, well, the people who know me. Like, I'm not saying anything other than like I'm talking. We're just talking about asking the question. We're not even agreeing with anything that's out there. We're just talking about like, Even just having the discourse is not
Where
allowed
where do
because
we go as a
having the question.
society if there are questions that can't be asked? Like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of great books written about what happens when you have thought police, right? And I don't think you promote more acceptance by banning speech.
Yeah.
You know, one of the outcomes of Trump is
But
we saw a lot more public racism, let's say. Now, most people, I think, would say that that's a bad thing. I have a very contrarian opinion on that. I think it's a great thing. Here's why I think it's a great thing. Because those people were already fucking racist. And we didn't know who they were. They were just slipping amongst subverting the culture and doing God knows what behind closed doors. I'd much rather them have a fucking flag out front, and now we can have a dialogue about why I think that's crazy, right? As opposed to like, we can't talk about, like, everybody just be hush hush. It's like these negative things do not go away by ignoring them. Only by calling them into the light and bringing forth an open heart with an intent to understand do you even have a prayer. Like, are you familiar with the black gentleman who's gotten like hundreds of Klansmen to retire their robes to him?
no, I don't think I do know that.
I'm going to Google that really quickly. Black man, Klan.
It sounds sort of familiar, but I don't know the history. I mean,
So, how one man convinced 200 Ku Klux Klan members to give up their robes. Daryl Davis is a blues musician. So, this is an NPR article. You can Google it. It's an unbelievable story, just on the face of it. It's like, how is that possibly true? Imagine that. Imagine being a black man and having 200, and it was probably more than 200 if he convinced 200, right? Because I'm sure his hit rate wasn't 100%. Having the chutzpah. But you know what?
so this
It
gentleman
It
Daryl,
didn't happen with hate. It happened with love. There's no other way.
and look, I mean, I'm looking at the article now. 30 years, 200 Klansmen. Most people do not have. I would say the majority of people, not just most, do not have that kind of time to. I mean, like, God bless this man Daryl, from what I'm reading, to be able to do that, right? To be able to put himself out there in danger, right? These are
Yeah.
people who would physically want to harm him and have that discourse with him. I remember Sarah Silverman, the comedian, she went out after Trump won in 2016 and went to like a lot of the people and started talking to them. And she got a lot of them. She not only started to empathize with, why they had voted, but also some of them came to like understand, where we were coming from as well. But it's that dialogue. People are just, I never want to say lazy. It's not that. We just live in a world. It's just too busy. There's too many things going on. And I agree with you. I don't think I think the vast majority of those people already existed, but I do think the vast majority, I mean, I would say above 90%, as your point. It's not like they weren't racist before, but I do think that there is a danger with, especially, like, I'm looking at it for the future and with like the kids, and like, how do we help from a security privacy standpoint, like, and from a technological, like, now I'm thinking like strategy consultant, like how do we help not not control what they see, but like, we have to admit, like, children are more impressionable than adults. They haven't defined their critical thinking skills yet. I don't want to ever like filter the world for my daughters, but at the same time, um, they do require a little bit more handholding than they would once they become adults. And at that point, you want to your point, like, train them with the critical thinking skills to make sure, like, they understand, like, is this a legitimate thing, or is this somebody just, putting horse shit, like the 89% of stats are made up on the spot, right? Like, that's,
So the approach that
you
I'm
would,
taking currently, and who knows how it all works out, right, is the only thing that I can count on, because I don't think you can really control anything. I think it's a complete illusion to even try. So my plan, or strategy, I should say, is to create a relationship where if they feel scared or curious, their first or second instinct is to come and talk about it. Because then if they don't feel judged and they feel open and safe to talk about anything, something that was risky, something that was illegal, something that they think might make me angry or make me think less of them, like whatever it is, if they feel like they have an open door, then at least there's a chance to engage on it. Because I think most of this shit happens behind closed doors and never gets brought up. And sorry, go ahead.
No. I love that. I saw a meme years ago saying, like, I don't want my kids to ever say, oh no, I fucked up. I don't want my parents to find out. I want my kids to say, oh no, I fucked up. I need to call my parents to, get them to help. Like, I want that mentality from them. So I 100% agree with you. That's all.
And not even like I need them to bail me out.
No.
I want their counsel.
Right.
These are people who are wizened because they've just been through the flagellation that is life, right? And they've had more bumps and bruises. They've had more opportunities to see how the world works. And let me just bounce this off of them, because that's something I didn't have, because I exited my home at 17 under inauspicious circumstances, let's say. And so even in my 20s, when I met Meg, we were first dating, or maybe we were engaged, maybe we were even married. And she would say things like, I want to ask my parents about this. And I literally had no map for that concept, because I had completely become independent, like during high school, because I moved out senior year. And I think that's, if to look back on it now, that's a loss. That's a big loss that I had, to not be able to seek counsel and have the freedom and the courage, right? Because you believe enough in yourself to just say, thanks for the feedback. Now I'm going to go do whatever the fuck I want. Right. But I never sought any feedback because I was too afraid of the criticism or the, pulling me off of my plan. Like once I was on a plan, I just needed to go execute it. I couldn't tolerate having something that was in the way. Anyway. Well, let me ask you one more question, Rudy, if you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all.
Because we got on the topic of spirituality tangentially as we were going through some of the abortion stuff and some of the other things. Do you currently see any of what you're doing with your kids, or how you think about incorporating that North Star into their lives? Do you see any of it as spiritual, whether overtly or covertly?
I always try to be overt, as you know, my favorite word. We pray. 7 days a week when we get in the car, first thing in the morning. 5 days a week, usually when I'm taking them to school. We always do our Father and Hail Mary, and we always pray for our friends, especially those who are going through health issues, which is the most important thing, because frankly, nothing else fucking matters in this world. Everything else is bullshit. Like, if you don't have your health, I mean, I'm not making light of it. I have
even just being sick with the flu or COVID,
just being sick with the flu. Like, so I overtly ingrain gratitude in them. So does Elsie, my wife. Like, even just like, so we do that in the morning. So that's a ritualistic, more of my Syrian Orthodox upbringing of doing our daily prayers, and asking my daughters. Well, Everdeen is 2, so she doesn't really get it. But
what are you grateful?
Mardine, like, like Mardine, like, what are we grateful for? Who are we praying for today? We have a prayer list that we go through of people that we pray for that have gone through or going through recent things, and just like long term and other things like that. Be it divorce, be it again, like be it any kind of health issue. And then, so those are the overt things. Like we ordered, I forget what it was. Last week we were all tired. None of us wanted to cook. And I was just like, what do you want, Mardine? And we just went and bought it. And it might not seem like a big deal, but I wanted her to know that it was a big deal that we got Chick-fil-A for dinner that night. Like, I wanted her to know that we're very lucky and that a lot of parents work really hard and they take care of their kids really well, but they still couldn't be able to do this. And it's not because they don't work as hard or they're not as smart or whatever. It's just, we're just lucky that, daddy has a job and mommy has a job that, we can just decide one day that, not one day, just that like one particular day, you know what, we're tired. Let's just, let's just go get, Chick-fil-A, or whatever, pizza, whatever for dinner. And I want her to know that because I don't want her to come from a place of scarcity. I do want her to come from a place of abundance, but that abundance should always be first and
Less,
foremost from gratitude.
right?
And I always want her to know that the only time you should ever be looking at anybody else's bowl is to make sure that they have enough. Not that they have more than you, but that they have enough. So those things I
That's beautiful.
always train her. And I think she does get that. Like we went to a friend's house who are wonderful, loving people. The husband's in construction, well to do. The house is unbelievable. They, built it. And the girl's bedroom was sick, like the two girls who we're friends with, and it was awesome. Even I was like, wow, this is an awesome bedroom. And like I was so proud of Mardine because like she said to the girl, she's like, I don't want to say their names, but she's just like, um, you have a really nice bedroom. And I was like, good for you for not being like, because her, first of all, her bedroom is sick too. I mean, not as sick as that one, but like at this point, it's like level of degrees. The
Yeah,
fact that one, she has her own
right,
bedroom,
exactly.
like you're already ahead of the curve. Like, and again, we're very blessed for that. But I mean, from a spirituality standpoint, I think it goes back. I mean, like I was raised on my mother's knee on the Bible. I mean, she would literally read to me, and I would say my prayers, and I would go to church myself all the time. And I have friends who are sisters of the Carmelite monastery. I know a lot of nuns. I know I probably have like more nuns friends than the average person you would talk to. A 102-year-old nun, Sister Patricia, who is still alive. She's my brother's godmother. She was actually my god sister because I'm also godfather to my brother, my younger brother of 13 years, which is, yeah, they made me godfather. I was 13 years old. They made me godfather to
Interesting.
him, which is great. I mean, I love him. He's my little brother. But so I was called the nun my god sister because we were both godmother and godfather. Anyway, I don't even know if that's a real term. So I mean, I have a lot of that. We try to go to church every Sunday. We don't because of multiple factors, including the crazy schedule. And like at a certain point, like Elsie and I were like, we need to give this stuff up because we want her to go to Sunday school and we want to be back part of our church community. Our church community starts in West Roxbury, is where our church is. So it's an hour drive.
I was
But
gonna say
that's
West
honestly that.
Roxbury.
Yeah, it's not like
Wow.
it's an hour drive. We've done it, and that's not actually the reason we don't usually go. Like I don't mind driving as much as I am a Rhode Islander. A 45-minute car trip is not a day trip to me. But I try to be overt about those things in my actions, and I really try to live, every life as I've told her and others. Like I think, I mean, me, obviously, whoever's listening to this may not know, but like I really just always try to have a positive experience with everybody I come in contact with. That doesn't mean I'm a sycophant or I want them to like me or anything. I just feel like going back to our conversation about the level of discourse in this country, like I don't think it's just necessary. You can have dialogue, you can disagree, you don't have to like everybody, not everybody has to like each other, but we can get along as neighbors and just be civil, and disagree about those things, and we can still be passionate in a positive way. So I know that was a long answer. You asked about covertly. I honestly, part of the reason I'm ranting right now, I'm trying to think about if I do anything covertly. I don't think I do. I would love to know if you do. Maybe I do the same things you do. I'm trying to think like what would I be doing that's covertly trying to instill
Well,
spirituality into her.
we
But
don't have an overt religious practice, so it feels like everything's covert just because a lot of the concepts I think are conceptually outside um, their ability to piece together. One of the big principles in the house that's constantly repeated is it kind? So like the first thing that happens when I come into a situation where there's raised voices and whatever, and there's about to need to be arbitrage of some kind, it's like the first question, well, is that kind? Is that a kind choice? And it's just remarkable how much that like instantaneously reframes the entire engagement, where it's just like, well, no, I guess it's not kind that I punched him or that I stole his thing or that and it's just like, it's like, okay, so that's the number one principle above all else is it kind? And what I think I like about that, or what feels true about that to me, is first of all, it's love based. And second of all, is it puts someone else before you. Right. And I think that that's probably the number one downfall of modern society today, is that we have elevated the individual above the totality. And I've talked about this on prior podcasts. It's like, well, if each atom and each molecule in each cell in my hand is not discrete from my hand, then how in the universe could we possibly think we are discrete from each other or from the earth? We're all on this little bubble from which we came, right? No matter how you think we were generated, whether the original, Adam and Eve or whatever, like we all came from this earth, from the food, from the dirt, from the sun and the rain and whatever. It's like irrefutable. So why am I going to be so concerned about me when there's so much about us? And I feel like the older I get and the more calm I get, the more I feel like all I want to do is be of service. And it's hard, obviously, when you're young, right? Because, and I think this is part of the original sin problem, is that I don't think it's possible for you to come out just ready, ascended. I think you have to go through the dependent state of being an infant and a toddler and a youngster. And so like you simply must go through that selfish period because it's just required. And if you didn't, then there's no test. There's no growth. And I think that's kind of fun, in a sick way. To have to undo all the trauma created from, being this little imperfect thing, and all the ways in which you weren't able to act in how you quote unquote should. Anyway, it's a bit of a ramble. But speaking of ramble, my brain is mush. And so I think I'm going to call it, but I've had an incredible time talking to you, my friend.
This was awesome. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for being brave enough to weather some very challenging topics.
Yeah, no, that is the topic, is the ability that we should be able to talk about anything in a way that, doesn't cause a lot of anxiety. I mean, these are difficult topics. Nobody has all the answers. But we won't get there if we don't ask the questions, as you said. So thank you, Matt. I know it's been a while. I can't wait to see you next time. By the way, I forgot to say to you, I realize this is the whole scheduling thing and everything that was going on. The music that you sent me was awesome.
Thank you.
Events that we're doing. Really enjoyed it. I thought I had texted you that, and then I was like looking at the text today when I was like confirming with you. I was like, oh, wait, I never actually wrote back and said that because I was listening on a car ride, but yeah, it was really cool. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed that. I've missed having a creative outlet, and I've missed having community since COVID sort of housebound me, because it peeled me out of CrossFit and jiu-jitsu and a bunch of other things, going to an office. So just being able to, spend a few hours, So thanks for listening, and I'm going to keep doing more of it. We're going to do it next Sunday. Absolutely. We're going to do another session. So I'll keep haranguing you with new clips.
Yeah. And I hope I see you in person again soon.
Oh, of course. Let's in fact, let's text about that tomorrow. Let's get.
Yeah, we will. We will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Love to the family.
Same to you. Have a good night.
Bye.